Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about whether backyard composting is worth it. Well, this is the bed I just set up. I completely emptied one of my compost bins into this raised bed and I planted tomatoes, beans, I have marigolds, and I have carrots across the front. And I interplanted with beets, which will appreciate the shade in the heat of the summer. So and the carrots are doing so well. But the reason I wanted to talk about this, look at the size of these tomato plants. These were grown from seed, and I planted them pretty early, but I wanted to show you the difference between compost soil and my ground soil, which is basically native soil clay, and I do amend it and I do fork it up quite a bit, but let me show you the difference. I also want to point out some of the compost wasn't even finished. The part that's not even finished was towards the bottom, and then the more finished compost is on the top. And full disclosure, I did buy some bags of soil on the top, maybe 10, but 10 bags for that entire huge bed is hardly anything. So this is primarily my homemade compost. These blueberry tomatoes were planted the same week. Look at the size of these. I'm not even sure they're a foot tall, but this is my clay soil, and I amended it with, I put bananas in the hole, I put some cabbage in the hole. I may have even put some eggshells in there and coffee grounds, but it's clay soil and it's just not as loose, and it's definitely not as fertile. So those, as you can see, are far behind the other ones in the raised bed where I used my homemade compost. These get a little more sun than the blueberry cherries, but again, you can see these are only about, 2.5 feet tall, whereas the other ones are so bushy you can't even see through them. But this is my zinnia garden, and it's pretty well amended, but it is clay soil, and I just think it's harder for tomatoes to grow through that, and it's certainly not as fertile. So these were all planted the same week. I have to say it must be my homemade compost. Let me just take a minute to show you these beautiful yellow flowers. The bees are going crazy. This is my stone crop sedum, and I have it planted all around my path. And I do have to pull out quite a bit of it just to keep it centered around the path so that it doesn't take over the whole garden. Isn't that gorgeous, guys? It's a sea of yellow. And boy, are the pollinators happy. They're happy about the Veronica as well. I hope all these colors are showing up brightly on this overcast day. Another area where I use all my homemade compost is along the Polytunnel. I used to plant directly in the ground, and I realized that if I put my homemade compost in containers, I have much better luck, much bigger plants. So this is 100% my homemade compost in all of the bins that I have around the garden. I guess they're more like totes, big plastic totes. But the zucchini plants are doing really well. Actually, everything I have planted in them is doing really well. And I have to credit it with my compost. And I may sound like I'm bragging, but you know, once you start growing a garden, you end up having a lot of garden debris. And if you just keep throwing that into your compost pile, I do it kind of willy-nilly, and I mix in kitchen scraps. And I have a friend that brings me huge bags of coffee grounds that she gets from, I believe, a Starbucks she goes to. Then you will have the most beautiful soil. You can even put unfinished compost in the bottom of your bin and put more finished compost on the top. So I will say I do buy some bags of soil for starting cuttings or starting seeds. But I can't imagine how much this would have cost if I had to buy bags of soil for all my garden areas. I'm pretty pleased with this shady little corner. This is a hydrangea, and a couple of beautiful hostas, a giant blue hosta and a beautiful variegated one that my friend Lori gave me. It's looking really pretty. Has nothing to do with homemade compost, but I thought I'd show you a pretty corner as we pass. So I use these Geo Bins around my garden, and I just throw in all of my yard waste. I throw in cardboard and paper and kitchen scraps, all kinds of things. I do avoid meat and dairy because I don't want unwanted visitors like foxes. We do have those in the neighborhood. But as you can see, I layer it in. I try to put greens and browns. Browns are things like sticks and mulch and wood, autumn leaves. Greens are just fresh material, even including coffee grounds are greens, so I put coffee grounds in there. But I put lots of weeds. I put dead or dying plants. I put any leaf drop that I notice. I'll pick it up around the yard and put it in there as green leaves. So I have green leaves, brown leaves, all kinds of yard waste. I just layer it in. I don't worry about too much turning. Occasionally I'll stir it up with a pitchfork. I'm a pretty lazy composter, and these Geo Bins do a terrific job. They're easy to dismantle once you empty it out. And in about 6 months, you get some pretty nice soil. You can even dig it out from the bottom before you empty the whole thing, because that's the most finished at the bottom, because it's the oldest. But don't worry about bugs either, because bugs and worms are the things that will break it down. Weeds are perfect for the compost pile. I've gathered a lot of green biomass for my compost pile just by weeding my garden. So the more weeds you have, the more compost you have. Here's a little corner of the rustic garden bed where I've spread some of my homemade compost, and already I can see that the cosmos seedlings are responding. So I'm hoping for some beautiful cosmos out of some beautiful compost. So guys, I think the results are clear. Having a backyard compost pile is totally worth it. Even if you're lazy about it, look at the results you can get. I'm just delighted with this bed, and I have got to find more material to compost. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you're composting in your garden. And of course, the more we all compost, the less goes into the landfill. So it's win-win all around. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.